Jonathan Lee Riches investigates. I am covering the Moscow, Idaho Bryan Kohberger case. A lot of you are curious on who the private driver was that took Kaylee and Madison home during those early morning hours right before the murders happened. Everyone is wondering, who was that private driver? Well, I found out the name of the private driver, and I found this out via the probable cause affidavit by Brett Payne, a unredacted version of it. I'm in possession of an unredacted version of the affidavit of probable cause affidavit that Brett Payne submitted seeking the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, but it names the private driver, and I want to share some information about the private driver just so you guys know. The private driver also gave a media interview about his thoughts on that day and what he's going through, but they kept him anonymous. But I'm going to share who this person is. His name is Eric Gower. Eric Gower. So this came from the probable cause affidavit submitted by Corporal Brett Payne. This video was captured by law enforcement. A private party, Eric Gower, reported that he provided a ride to Gonzalez and Mogan at approximately 1:56 from downtown Moscow in front of the grub truck to the King Road residence. Mortensen and Funk both made statements during interviews that indicated the occupants of the King Road residence were at home by 2 a.m. and asleep, or at least in their rooms, by approximately 4 a.m. So he also lists Mortensen and Funk by name instead of initials in this unredacted affidavit of probable cause I have in my possession. Eric Gower, the private driver that took Kaylee and Madison home from the grub truck. Who is Eric Gower? Well, it looks like, according to Facebook, his public post, that he works for a organization in Moscow called Bridge, Idaho. It's some sort of positive outreach organization. Eric Gower. And Eric Gower spoke to the media about what he's feeling, because technically he was the last person to see Kaylee and Madison alive, believe it or not, outside of that Moscow home. So check this out and then we'll further discuss. So this was a news article by the Daily Mail back in December of 2022. Exclusive. Private taxi driver who drove Idaho roommates Kaylee and Madison home hours before they were knifed to DEATH breaks his silence, saying the two roommates were just excited about their food and nothing seemed amiss. The private taxi driver who drove Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan home the night they were KILLED broke his silence in an interview with the Daily Mail. He believed to be the last person to see the pair alive after picking them up from the grub truck in downtown Moscow in the early hours of November 13th. I had known Kaylee and Maddie and Xana too. They would occasionally get rides home, and there was nothing out of the ordinary about that night. The driver, who spoke on a condition of anonymity, said he's replayed the night a million times over, but can't recall anything that was amiss. Speaking for the first time exclusively to Daily Mail, the private driver, who was probably the last person to see friends Kaylee and Madison alive, it's weighed on me. I've replayed that night a million times over, trying to think if there was some sign or some detail that something was amiss, but there was nothing. It's not lost on me that my job was to get these girls home safe, but that didn't really help this time. So the shocking killings marked the first homicides in Moscow in 7 years. With no lead shared, no suspects named, many have questioned the town's police department investigators' abilities to handle a crime of such magnitude. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, he said, I had known Kaylee and Maddie and Xana too. They would occasionally get rides home, and there was nothing out of the ordinary that night. I picked them up at 1:45 a.m., said the driver. They had their food, and they were super excited about their mac and cheese, as girls are after they go to the club. They sat in the back, and they chatted.
They were normal like any other night. They weren't upset about anything or talked about anyone. The driver said he was familiar with surveillance footage in which one of the girls appears to be talking about someone called Adam earlier that evening. He said they didn't talk about him or any boy in that ride. According to the drivers, sometimes the girls would talk about boys, but that night they were just excited about their food. There was no apprehension, no weird feelings there, no upsetness. There was no nervousness about them. They weren't afraid of anyone. There was nobody following them or following us. There was absolutely nothing about the ride that was different or abnormal. They were just typical sorority girls talking away and having the time. They don't pay a whole lot of attention to us drivers. We just kind of doing our thing. The driver said he didn't pull right up to the door of the girl's house, stopping instead on the street out front. He said, I just sort of pulled in front of their driveway. I didn't pull right into the parking lot. I usually try not to do that because there's an easy way to get robbed. I try to stay in positions where I can go either direction so I can get away if I have to. It's never happened, but you hear about these things. But on that night, he said he felt no threat. In fact, he said, I didn't watch them go all the way in. There was the two of them. It's a relatively safe split place. It's not something I would usually sit and watch. Sometimes I absolutely will ask if I feel a kid needs help. I've taken kids to get their stomach pumped if I feel they have to. This is a college town. These kids are just trying to live their lives. We drivers try to look out for them. They don't need to be preyed on. The fact that Kaylee and Madison and their friends were so abruptly murdered within a couple hours of him making the drop off has the driver said it still weighs on him. He said, I've been driving for years and it weighed on me. It was rough to think I was one of the last people to see them alive. When I saw the news on Monday, it occurred to me I was in that neighborhood, but that was before they released any names. As soon as I knew for sure it was the girls, I went to police. He said he was swiftly eliminated from inquiries, have provided officers with a wealth of digital data and the time received from the Taco Bell to which he went after dropping the girls back home. In the weeks since the murders he watched, he said, with dismay, as police have shared little information and families of the victims have grown increasingly impatient. He said, I took about a week off driving when I just stepped back from it all. Those kids deserve justice and they're not getting it. It feels to this community like the police aren't even trying. So there you go. This is from the driver. This is from the driver, Eric Gower. Let me know what you think. And he remained anonymous in this article, but he's listed in the probable cause affidavit.
You know, he seems like a good dude, young guy. Why did Kaylee and Madison choose him as, to bring him home? And there's, I'm just wondering, not saying Eric Gower is involved in any way, but I'm just wondering if the link to Bryan Kohberger and the victims go through Eric. Basically, Eric takes, two of them home. I'm just wondering if Bryan Kohberger was lurking somewhere in that area, possibly, and was following them. Don't know for sure because there's no surveillance of Bryan Kohberger in Moscow at that time. They were coming home. Phone pings obviously were turned off, but he could have been in Moscow and his phone could have been turned off because we still don't have a connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims. A lot of people think there's a connection through the DoorDash, but I wanted to share some information about Eric Gower. He's probably seriously traumatized by this, and I wouldn't blame him. Imagine you taking someone home and then something happens to them once you drop them off. You would feel probably a little bit guilty. Do you think? Subscribe to my channel, hit the notification button. I have this redacted version of Affidavit probable cause. It is out there, but you have to dig for it. But I do have it, and it does say some interesting stuff that we have not necessarily seen. Some of you might have seen it, but I haven't heard anyone talk about Eric Gower and some of the other things I found in there that I will further discuss in videos. Haven't really seen out there. So I'll be sharing that soon. So stay tuned. Everyone be safe. God bless.